Hello, everyone. Today we'll start talking about meditation 6. And here we see a actual argument for what scholars have called substance dualism, an argument for Descartes' claim that minds and bodies are radically different kinds of things. In that Descartes thinks that entails that the soul or the mind endures the death of the body. So here's this depiction of someone dying and then its soul going out, right? Its soul escaping the body. And Descartes thinks that this argument provides a good ground for our thinking that the soul does not, or the soul or the mind, those are interchangeable for Descartes, pretty much. The soul of the mind does not die with the body decays and dies, the soul endures. That's one of the main things we'll look at. We're also actually going to look at the argument for thinking that there's an external world that corresponds to the senses. Once we have God in the picture, it goes relatively smoothly, thinks Descartes. So let's look at the argument for thinking that the soul and the body are radically different kinds of things, such that the death of the body does not entail death of the soul. The mind endures, claims Descartes. And here's the argument. The main claim is this one, the principle of separability. Descartes articulates this carefully in the work that we did not read, but it's operating, it's working within Meditation 6. And here's what the principle says. I think A, and think of A as a variable, like in math, like in algebra. I think A is distinct or different than other than a thing B, if and only if A can exist without B and B can exist without A. Now, typically when we talk, we say, think of a thing A and a thing B, and we just assume that we're talking about different things. And that's kind of the point of saying, oh, a randomly selected thing A and a different randomly selected thing B, and then we make a point of those things. Don't impose that way of reading, that way of thinking into this claim. Think more like algebra. You say a number X and a number Y, right? You say when you think of variables like X and Y in algebra, there is the assumption that X and Y may have the same value, the same number 3 in some cases. And that's perfectly fine, right? It's just two variables that range over the same domain of numbers. So sometimes they'll be the same, sometimes not. And there's no assumption that if you're talking about a variable X and a variable Y, that they're exclusive of each other, that they do not or cannot have the same value, they can have the same number. That's the right model. That's what Descartes is thinking here. So a thing A and a thing B, which may or may not be the same, are actually distinct. They're different things when one can exist without the other, in the reverse as well. So think of my hands, for example. I have a right hand and a left hand. And these are distinct things. How do I know that? Well, they both currently exist, right? They exist together now. But if I were to get in an accident and my left hand will be, chopped off, my right hand will endure. It will continue to exist. So my right hand can exist without my left hand. It doesn't have to, my left hand doesn't actually have to be chopped off for my right hand to be, for it to be true that my right hand can exist without my left hand. So it's not a claim about what actually has to happen. It's a claim about what can happen. It doesn't actually have to occur. It just must be possible for my right hand to exist without my left hand, by my left hand being chopped off in an accident, for it to be true that it is possible for my right hand to exist without my left. In the reverse as well. It says that both must be true. So the accident can work out differently, and my right arm can be my right hand can be the one that is chopped off. And in that case, my left hand would exist without my right hand. So it is possible, one, for my right hand to exist without my left hand by having an accident, and then it's also possible for my left hand to exist without my right hand by having a slightly different kind of accident. So it is possible for both of those things to happen. And this principle enables me to conclude on the basis of those two claims about possibility, enables me to conclude that my right hand and my left hand are different. They're distinct things because one can exist without the other. And that seems like the right implication. Think of the difference between, say, something like my height. I am 6'2", so I'm relatively tall. And my height is something that cannot exist without me. but I can exist without that particular height, that 6'2" height. In fact, I have existed in the past when I was younger at had a different height. So there was a point in time, it's not just possible, but it actually happened. There was a point in time in which I existed, the person Juan existed, and I was not 6'2". So my height of 6'2" did not exist, and I exist. I did exist. So it meets one of the conditions. A is me, the person Juan. B is my height, 6'2". So I can exist without my 6'2". So you might think, oh, that makes us two different kinds of things. But it doesn't quite get us there, because we also need that my height can exist without me for us to be two different kinds of things. And that's not true. My height, my being 6'2" cannot exist if I don't exist. It necessarily presupposes my existence. Someone else can be 6'2", but that wouldn't be my height. That would be someone else's height, which happens to be the same. But my height, my being 6'2", presupposes that I exist. My essence presupposes that I exist, and so on. So there's some things that I have that are separable from me, but I am not separable from them because they cease to exist. They depend on me for their existence. And some people think that that's how minds work. The body requires, the mind requires the body to exist, but the body can exist without the mind. And therefore, they're not really distinct. But here's how the argument proceeds. Here's how Descartes thinks things are. First, a uncontroversial claim, the body can exist without the mind, and we call those corpses. And you look again at the picture here. It's depicting the mind or soul departing from the body. So by the time this thing is depicted, the soul is out, right? You see the soul has left the body. So the body that is laying down there, we call a corpse, is a no longer animated body. It's a body that no longer has a mind or a soul. It is the body still, it's there, it's starting to decay, but it's no longer has a mind. So the body can exist without the mind by there being corpses. That's the first game. So A is the body, B is the mind, and the body can exist without the mind. That's one of the two conditions for the principle of separability, and that's uncontroversial, right? The corpses are a good example, not just of possibility, but of actuality. Actual corpses exist that are bodies without minds or without souls. Here's the third, slightly more controversial, though Descartes thinks by this point well established. The mind can exist without the body. The mind does not relate to the body in the way in which, say, my being 6'2" relates to my body. My body is required for my height to exist, though the height is not required for my body to exist. My body can be bigger or smaller. That's not how the mind relates to the body, claims Descartes. And he thinks, I already established that. Go back to the evil demon example. Remember at the end of meditation 2, we knew some things with certainty, that we existed, that Descartes said, I exist, I'm a thinking thing, that's my nature. And I know the content of my experience, but I still don't know if any of the experiences are veridical. So again, let's go back to the cup. I have an experience of the cup. I have that, but I still don't know whether the cup exists. It is possible for the cup not to be there, even though I have the experience. So it is possible for me to have an experience of a cup with no cup, hallucinations, evil demon stories. But again, my body, I have an experience of my body, my hand, for example. My experience of my body is also separable from the veracity or truth of my experience. In other words, it is possible for me to experience that I have a body when I do not have a body. The mind can exist by itself with no external world, with no external world that includes bodies, this particular body. So it is possible for my mind to exist without the body. That was kind of the skeptical scenario in which the evil demon shed doubt on all sorts of beliefs about the world grounded in the senses. And one of the particular beliefs was our having a body, my having a body, this body. So Descartes thinks that was established already, right? We proved that at some point. So it is possible that the mind exists without the body. And once you have both of those, now it's just an application of the principle of separability. The mind and the body are in some sense like the two hands. One can exist without the other. So the one of my hands dies or disappears, or it's chopped off, does not entail or require that the other one dies or disappears or is chopped off, right? They're separable. They're separate things. Likewise, when the body dies death, the mind need not die, right? They're separate things. So the conclusion, though, is that the mind and the body are really distinct. And they're different kinds of things, something like two hands. And Descartes thinks that just follows from this argument. The separability of the mind and the body entails that they're different kinds of things. They exist together during their life, like my hands exist together during my life. But they can come apart. And at death, the body and the mind do come apart, just like in an accident, one of my hands can come apart from the other. So here's the view that philosophers have given to Descartes' position: substance dualism. And it's the claim that in reality, in the real world, there are fundamentally two different kinds of substances, minds and bodies. The nature of mind is to think. There are thinking things. That's a category, that's a substance, type of substance. And there are bodies. They're like things like cups, this body, books. And those are different kinds of substances, and they both exist in the real world. They're two fundamentally different kinds of things. And let's give a little bit more precision to the word substance here. A substance or substances are things that have properties, the things that are the bearers of properties, or where the properties adhere. And they're the things that undergo change. I am the substance, and I have the property of, being 6'2". I am the one that undergoes change if I grow or get smaller. Me, the thing that endures, is the substance that have the properties to hide. I have the property of being ignorant about some history, Mexican history or something. And then when I learn, I undergo the change of acquiring knowledge. I go from being ignorant to being knowledgeable about a particular subject matter. And the substance that endures the change, is the thing that has the properties. And that thing is the substance. Substances are the bearers of the properties that undergo change. So in the subject predicate sentence, the dog is white. The dog refers to, the subject refers to the thing that is the substance that has the property. And white is the property, or the predicate that denotes the property being had by the subject. So to be a substance dualist of the Descartes variety is to think that there are two different kinds of substances that have different kinds of predicates, different kinds of properties. Minds are thinking things that have thoughts, that deliberate, that reason. Bodies are physical things that are extended, that have shape, that have location, that have mass, that have force, that are pushed around. Those are different kinds of categories. So that's the substance dualism part. Here's finally the argument for the proof for the existence of the external world, which is predicated upon God. And now again, look at the picture of the window looking outward into the real world. And if this argument succeeds, then Descartes thinks we can think of the window much like here, as partly open. And the partly open is supposed to indicate reality as it is. And the thing you see through the glass of the window is reality as represented by our experiences. And this picture represents that, it's the same thing. The windows are not distorting. Reality is roughly the way in which it appears on the basis of the senses. But this is not the naive empiricist starting point of deliberation. This is the conclusion of a long, elaborate, and complex series of arguments on the basis of reason to justify trusting the senses. It's not naive trusting the senses, it's the conclusion of a complicated argument. So here's the argument for the external world, which culminates the whole kind of story of the meditations. Observation number 1, I have a great natural propensity to think that my sensory ideas are produced by external objects which resemble them. Again, this is the same observation we made before. I have an experience of a cup, and it is very natural for me to have the propensity to form the belief there is a mind-independent thing, there is a cup that matches or resembles my experience of the cup. Right? So this is an observation about us, human beings. We have the natural propensity that take this picture as the right picture. reality as it is pretty much or roughly the way in which it is depicted in our experiences. We have the experience, the window or the glass, and we naturally move to, oh, reality is that way. We naturally move to the, oh, the window's open, I can see reality as it is. We have the propensity to move from experiences to beliefs grounded in experiences. Actually, remove that, sorry. We've seen this before, right? And Descartes said that's just not good enough, that we have the natural propensity for believing the content of our experiences is not enough for granting knowledge. Why? Because I could be wrong. I could be deceived, I could be dreaming, I could be hallucinating. He gives us all sorts of arguments. But let's throw in two now. Two makes one reasonable, justifiable. God created me and he gave me this natural propensity. Okay, so I know that God exists. You know, he gave us arguments for that. And God is the creator. He gave me this natural propensity. Furthermore, 3, if this natural propensity were mistaken, if the window didn't match the thing past the window, if my experience was not faithful to, adequate, corresponding with the reality that is past the window, God would be deceiving me. He would have given me faculties that are deceptive. The sensory apparatus that enables me to have experiences would be inadequate. It would not capture reality as it is in itself. And that would make the maker a deceiver, because I have the natural propensity to think that reality is the way I'm experiencing it, and the natural propensity will be deceptive. And if God made me that way, God would be deceiving me. God would be deceptive. But hey, God is not a deceiver. Quote, since the light of nature teaches us that fraud and deception necessarily proceed from some defect. To be deceptive and fraudulent and to, you know, do those things is to have a defect of sorts, a moral defect typically. But to have a defect is incompatible with a perfect nature, right? God is the supremely perfect being. So he has no defects, yes. And because he has no defects, he's not a deceiver. Yes, he is not a deceiver. The faculties he gave me are not deceptive, so I can trust those faculties. So my natural propensity to think that reality matches my experience of reality is not mistaken. But now this is the conclusion of an argument embedded within which there's a lot of crucial moves Descartes' part. Therefore, there is an external world that matches or resembles or corresponds to my sensory ideas of it. When I see the cup, there is a cup there, in the normal case anyways. And I have reasons for trusting that. I have reasons for believing that. I'm not just naively beginning investigation with that assumption in mind. It's no longer an assumption, it's a conclusion of an elaborate argument. This is the end of the meditations. I exist, my thoughts exist, God exists, and God vindicates, validates the reliability of my senses. So I know there's a mind-independent world and I know my senses are reliable. I can do science reliably because those assumptions, those conclusions are in place. I can trust the deliverances of science, empirical science, because I have reasons for trusting them, namely the ones we've laid down and articulated. That is Descartes' basic picture, very ambitious basic picture. I'd like to end the discussion on Descartes by pointing a problem. And I don't like to do this in general, but given how influential this problem has been ever since Descartes articulated things in the way he did so clearly, the problem has been with us and it's still with us today. So let's look at the problem. And this is the causal interaction problem. If mind and body really are different kinds of substances, it seems that they cannot causally interact. It seems that they cannot influence each other. So minds are affected by things like thoughts, reasons, deliberations, ideas. If you want to move someone else's mind to change them for the political position or something like that, what you do is you sit with them, you talk to them, you put forth reasons, you deliberate, you engage in dialogue. And the point of that is to move their intellect, to move their mind to believe something, right? That's how minds get affected or influenced. It is through thinking, through reasons, through thoughts. That's how minds interact with other minds. Bodies as extended things are affected by things like other extended things. motion, force, the push around by other objects. There's the physical cup, and I push it with another physical object and push it to the side. That's how I cause things to happen within bodies. Bodies cause other bodies by having similar kinds of attributes and properties like motion, force, and so on. And those causally interacting, that's intelligible, right? That's physics. So it's perfectly intelligible how minds influence or cause other things in other minds. It's perfectly intelligible how bodies cause or influence things happening in other bodies. What's far from clear is how minds and bodies interact with each other. Put differently, given that minds have no location, they are not extended to be a mind, to be a body, and they're not bodies. Because they do not occupy space and they don't have any physical properties, it seems that they cannot be the source of things that can causally interact with other external things. If minds have no location, no mass, no force, none of those physical properties, then it seems that they cannot cause bodies to move or to do anything. And likewise, bodies. If bodies do not have thoughts, deliberations, reasons, it seems that they cannot influence minds, because those are the things that influence minds. It's worth noting that for someone like Aquinas, a proponent of hylomorphism, this is not really a problem, or at least not as a salient of a problem, that's a big of a problem. The soul for Aquinas is the form of the body, and thus the soul is located everywhere where the body is located. It's located fully and everywhere, fully in every part in which the body is. The soul is fully located in each part of the body. And the body moves in virtue of the soul. The soul is what gives it powers, propensities, and structures the kinds of motions or movements that the body can have. So it doesn't seem to be that strange that bodies move in the way they move, because this form of the body, namely the soul, makes them do so. So causal interaction there is not as strange, not as hard to understand. For Descartes, however, it is a great puzzle that my thoughts say, or my will to raise my arm. I think and will, make the will to raise my arm. It's hard to know how that converts into my arm rising, right? I will let my arm rise, and there it goes. But like the there it goes part, the racing part, is intelligible in terms of muscles, in terms of kind of causal interaction here, which goes through the brain. There's electrical impulses that kind of govern that, and that's intelligible at that physical level. It's not clear how my thought, my will to raise my arm, became part of the causal story. And likewise, when I see a mug of coffee mug, and I think, that's a cool looking mug, I want to buy it. And then my hand reaches out and touches it, and I tell the store owner, how much do I owe you for this, right? So there's this causal interaction. The body sees, the mind thinks, I like it. It tells the body, approach the store owner, utter these words, how much do I owe you for this cup? Right, so there's this, it appears, causal interaction going on all the time. Physical things influence thinking, thinking influences bodily motions influence other physical things, and so on. For Descartes, it's extremely hard to figure out how that works. He pointed to the brain, like some contemporary people do, but that doesn't really help, right? How does the mind interact with the brain? If that's the point of contact between the mind and the body, we still have not answered how does that work out. How is it that the mind, which is not physical, is interacting with a purely physical thing like brain? That's very puzzling. Okay, let's end here. I will see you next time.